Okay, guys, welcome to chapter 10 of The Rat Father. I am so glad you've stuck with me. I appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying the story. Please leave comments below. I have a Facebook page, Aunt Dada, and I have an Instagram, Aunt Dada. I post cool little articles I find about rats and squirrels and all kinds of things. And squirrels are just, oh, they're terrible pranksters. Man, they're doing all kinds of stuff. There is one that's like an American Ninja Warrior kind of thing that someone set up in their backyard and this squirrel goes through it. It is the funnest video. Anyway, we're on to chapter 10. It's called Slipknot and a Betrayal. Things get serious, y'all. Are you ready for it? Over the next few days, practicing for the show became an intricate dance of avoiding beefeaters, tours, and stray visitors to the tower. We became masters at setup and breakdown. Our gear became more refined, less bulky. Our knots were tighter, and our ropes were coiled neatly at all times. We learned from our mistakes and kept safety as our number one concern. But the act being a staggering display of daring do was always a close second in our mind. That is why when it all went wrong, we were completely unprepared. It was Tuesday morning. We were holding practices on the roof of the White Tower. Hugin had rigged up a gazebo that was a match to the one we hoped to use in the park. Fleur had contacted her mother, who put her in touch with a, quote, close friend of the royal family. I was supposed to meet with this friend and get clearance to perform in the park. I was hoping to secure a space in front of the gazebo so it would be easier to hide our gear and tie up our trapeze set. Practice started fine. It was during the second act when everything went pear-shaped. Nellie had her safety harness on and was looping through some hummingbirds when we all heard a pop, then a loud twang. She had just reached the top of a large loop-de-loop and was falling back into a headspin directly at the ground. I heard a zinging noise and I could smell burning rope. The ground crew and I were frantically searching for the origin of the noise. Nellie's face changed as she felt the slack in her rope when it should have pulled tight. Ray ran underneath her with his paws out in a useless attempt to stop her fall. Dan swarmed up a nearby rope and launched himself at Nellie with his arms spread wide to catch as much wind as possible to slow their descent. She fell into him with a thud, and they both hit the ground with a smack. Hard. We all gasped. The sound they made when they hit was not a good one. I know I heard a crunch. Dan shuddered and groaned. He unfolded himself from around Nellie's limp body. Rojas flapped off to find Hugin. Ruff ran forward, grabbed the string that was tied to Nellie's safety harness, and began following it with his paws. I pushed past everyone to get to Nellie with my first aid kit in my hand. Ray ran up beside me. I pointed him toward Dan. Check him for injuries, I said, then turned back to Nellie. I rolled her gently onto her side. I ran my paws over each leg. She woke up screaming when I touched her left front shoulder. The fur was bloody, and I could see a bit of bone sticking out. She cried out from pain, and then cried out from the pain of crying out. She looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears and her tail trembled. Poor little squirrel. She was just a kid having fun, and now she had a broken limb. Why? She whimpered. I stroked her fur and whispered to her it would be all okay. Hugin arrived, took one look at the arm, and decided Nellie needed to stay in the infirmary. I tried to secure her arm to her as best I could for the flight. She kept crying out, so I don't think I was that successful. I held her against me to steady her, and Hugin carried us both to the infirmary. I spent the next few hours assisting Hugin in setting the bones in Nellie's foreleg. I wanted to faint and throw up, but I didn't. I also fielded questions from everyone about anything they could think of to panic about. I was exhausted. Dan was bruised, but okay. I asked how he was. He flashed a grin and 2 hairy thumbs up. Hardcore parkour, my friend, he said. I shook my head at his resilience. He was crazy, but he was crazy good, too. Ray said everyone had scattered after Hugin took off, and now the tower was a big rumor mill. The show was off, the show was on. Nellie was dead, Nellie was alive. Dan was dead, Dan was alive. Or, my favorite, we'd all just gotten eaten by a hawk and on the roof. My head spun with all the chaos. I was making my way to the equipment nest when Ruff found me. I knew by his face I was not going to like what he had to say. Ruff had changed since the squabble. He seemed less like a guard and more like one of us. He no longer argued with me every time I spoke, helped more with Moonin and Hugin, and I had actually seen him laughing with a few squirrels while they sat and ate during a break in practice. That easy manner had disappeared. The Ruff of old was back and stiffer than before. He held out a gnawed piece of rope. "Sabotage," he said. I took it from him and ran my paws over the frayed edges. It had definitely been chewed through halfway. Ruff then held out a tuft of brown fur. "I gathered these from the edges. At least we know what color animal to look for," he said. I nodded, and that it wasn't a bird. I sighed. Great. It wasn't bad enough to have gotten the attention of Caper and Croesus. Now we had someone actively trying to kill us? I miss the good old days when I was just paranoid and no one was trying to kill anyone else. I rubbed my whiskers with a shaky paw. When had I last slept? I couldn't remember. It seemed like everything was just a roller coaster to Friday and my big jump. Ruff added to my weariness by saying, "Caper is here to see you. Follow me." "Why does he want to see me?" I asked Ruff's backside, because he'd already turned away. He ignored my question. I followed the rest of the way in silence. Caper stood in a pool of moonlight on a windowsill. He didn't turn to face us. Instead, when he spoke, he gazed at the moon. "Ah, young Bern, how fares our circus?" he asked me. "Our circus?" I said. I didn't like that at all. Caper sniffed. "Yes, our circus. Surely what belongs to one rat belongs to us all." I nodded. I saw where this was heading. I knew I was in danger, but it had been a long day, and seeing my friends get hurt had put me in a strange mood. I was going to let Caper paint himself into a corner with his logic. I'd had enough of his extortion. "Like the trash belongs to us all," I said. He finally turned to me, his eyes hard like black little dots. Why, yes, that was exactly what I was thinking. I took a deep breath and shrugged. "There have been changes." Caper's eyes narrowed. "What changes?" I coughed. "Well, there are the mice." He drew back and wrinkled his muzzle. "Mice?" Yeah. Ruffles sidled nearer to me and added, "And the hummingbirds. Don't forget about them." I glanced at him. He gave me a look of practiced innocence. Caper snorted. "Hummingbirds? What about 'em?" I said, "They're a part of the show, too." "Are they?" he snapped. "Yes," I replied, then ticked off the performers on my front claw. "And the clown troupe of geese and squirrels. The ravens have been a great help behind the scenes, so they're definitely part of the show. And oh yes, one grasshopper. So that's rats, geese, hummingbirds, squirrels, ravens, mice, and a grasshopper is in the show. So I guess it's all of ours, the circus. One big happy family, right?" Caper stared at me with his jaw hanging open. I pushed my luck by saying, "Perhaps we could send out a notice so all the rats and geese and birds and squirrels and mice and bugs know they're all part of this circus." I glanced at Ruff. "Maybe not to all bugs. There are a ton of those. Maybe just to grasshoppers? What do you think, Ruff?" Ruff shook his head at my bravado. Caper sighed and snapped his fingers. Ruff knocked me to the floor, but I noticed he held me lightly. Less rough than the last time. Caper stomped forward and leaned close to my muzzle. So what are you saying, little rat? He growled. I spat some dust out of my mouth and replied, if it's yours because you're a rat, then it's all of theirs too, because they have performers in the show too. Don't be stupid, he snapped. Huh, I answered. I'm not being stupid. I pushed Ruff's paws off me and stood to face Caper. I'm being fair. Fair, Caper yelled. Fair! Ah! He tugged at his ears in anger. He shook a clenched paw at me. I refused to cower. He spat at me. Where did you and that idiot friend of yours get the idea that a rat's life is fair? The only thing in life that is fair is death. It comes to us all. That is the only guarantee in life. A fair is something held in the country with pigs, pies, and prizes, and it is definitely not the same thing. Wrong, I shouted back. Fair is when you get what you work for, and you haven't worked for anything in years, Caper. Caper was furious. He almost choked on his words. I haven't worked for anything, you ignorant rat. You have no idea the things I've done for you ungrateful wretches. You can't begin to imagine the life I've saved you from. Without my information gathering, without my organization, you would all just be scrabbling out in existence at the mercy of everything. Huh, I said. So lucky for us, we're just at the mercy of you? Thanks, but no thanks, I told him. Caper snarled. Ruff, deal with this trash. Ruff stood straight. No, sir, he replied. We both stared at him in shock. Ruff was the equivalent of Caper's son, the heir to the trash trade. To refuse even one order risked that. But Ruff knew a lot. He knew where all the treasures and most of the bodies were buried. I don't know why he chose to stand up to Caper at that moment, but he did. Caper looked old for the first time. Caper said, No, my son? Ruff shook his head. No. If the circus belongs to anyone, it belongs to all of us. Caper warned him, This is a bad precedent to be setting, young Ruff. Ruff answered, No, if it's not bad. It's fair. Caper sighed. Was it fair, the battles I had to wage to get us even this far as a species? The old rat father was a barbarian with no vision. Is it fair? Ruff interrupted him. No, it's not fair you had to do those things alone. Plenty of things out of our control happen that aren't fair. But the things we can control, we should try to make them fair. Don't you agree? Caper shook his head. You don't think I know that, he said. I try to make things fairer for all the rats of London. Ruff replied, Making it fair for just the rats makes you just as bad as the squirrels that are only interested in helping the squirrels. If it's not for everyone, it's not really being fair. Caper drew back as if Ruff had struck him and said, Everything I have done was to protect my family. All of you are my family. Every rat in this blasted city is my family, he yelled at Ruff. Ruff reached out and patted Caper's shoulder and said, I know, I'm just saying, maybe we should extend our family a bit? Ruff turned and motioned for me to leave. I scuttled away while their muffled voices echoed behind me. I could have said something about the tattoo on Caper's hip, throw his origins in his face, call him a common snake snack like he called me, and then he would have reached out and snapped my little neck. Better to keep that information to myself for now. I was irritable, not stupid. I found a lost little shadowy corner and curled up in it to catch some sleep. I dreamed of Fleur turning lazy circles in the sky as a gathering storm built behind her. Her feathers were adorned with colored streamers, and the park players marched beneath her dressed as a loud, boisterous marching band. Elwood looked perfect, pounding away on a huge bass drum. Boom, 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 boom. The squirrels played snare drum and marched with militant precision. That means in line. While the mice played the brass instruments and wiggled and glided along to their own rhythm. The hummingbirds flew in formation and spun flags to frenetic music. Ray was the band leader. He wore a high hat and spun a striped cane with a knob on the end. He marched and danced in front of everyone. He kept waving at me and mouthing something, but the band was so loud I couldn't hear him. The wind picked up and the players were blown about. The horn playing became squeaks and clanks and drums bounced and blew away as the storm approached. Ray kept grinning and waving. I had no idea how long I slept, but I awoke to my name being whispered by Fleur. Bern, Bern, it's time to wake up. Bern. I said, Time for what? She said, to meet our royal friend in the park. I glanced around. It was dark. Now? Fleur shrugged. His schedule is not his own to dictate. Jake will escort you since I'm unable to leave the tower grounds at the moment. I asked, what? Why? Fleur extended her wing. I saw where they had been clipped almost back to the pin feathers. I knew Frank did it humanely, but it still looked like butchery to me. Fleur lived to fly, and now she would have to wait and train more. My eyes welled up in frustration. She clucked her tongue. She said, don't weep for me, Bern. She leaned forward to peck me on the cheek. I'm a tough old bird, and you are too soft-hearted, she told me. Sometimes I don't know whether to kiss you or eat you, you delightful little morsel. I blushed with pleasure at her kiss and her words, but then I thought about their actual meaning. I said, wait, when you say eat, you're joking, right, Fleur? Fleur sighed. Oh, Bern. Sorta. I followed her to the roof where Ruff and Elwood waited for me. Elwood looked at Ruff and then at me and honked. He insisted on going, he said. I shrugged. Since Nellie's fall, I don't mind the company at all. Elwood snorted. Suit yourself. Just more work for me lugging another fur ball around. Ruff held up a paw and said, Hey, I'm right here. I can hear you, you know. Elwood just stared at him. A goose had a good stare. They have a really long beak to give it a good run-up to your eyeballs. See what I mean? When a goose stared at you, you stayed stared at. Ruff gave up on getting an apology and followed me onto Elwood's back. We flew a little while before I worked up the courage to ask. How'd it go with Caper? I asked him. He said, it went. He isn't happy, but you made a good point of the show being, quote, multi-species. That's new for him, and he doesn't like new things. I asked Ruff, how are you with new things? Ruff grinned and scratched the tip of his pink nose with his back leg and then looked up at the sky. Well, the clown makeup does stain my fur something awful, he said, but I'm finding I have a talent for new things. I looked at him. Thanks for stepping in back there with Caper, I said. He smiled at me. He's an old street rat, but in his way he is a good rat. Ruff gave me a serious stare. London will one day be my city. And when it is, we might need to renegotiate the terms of your show. For now, you will surrender 1/10 of the take to be distributed as Caper sees it. I looked at him. 1/10? That is robbery, I told him. Ruff smiled at me. No, it's taxes, he told me. Caper may be a bully and a criminal, but he is the leader of all the rats in London. You will pay him his due, because one day I'll take his place. I told Ruff, he's your leader, not mine. Ruff said, he's yours too. You accepted the first time you handed over food to me and Tumble. I said, I wasn't happy about it. Ruff shrugged. You didn't need to be happy about it. You just had to do it. It's respect. I chafed at this. But I don't respect him. I only fear him. Ruff said, sometimes fear makes the leader, but I don't plan to be the next rat father. I plan to be the first rat king. I gaped at him. King? He slapped me on the shoulder. I dream big, like you, Bern. I looked at him, I was like, but king? He just smiled and settled in to enjoy the ride to the park. I didn't know how serious he was about being a king. Croesus mentioned a coronation when he threatened me. Coronations are king stuff, but I assumed Caper was throwing the party for himself. Who knows? All I knew is I was sad and a little scared that Fleur would not be with me at this meeting. She was such a fine diplomat. When we landed, I looked for our contact, Brigadier Leamington. I had no idea what he would look like. I peered into the dark and shrubbery, and finally I just gave in and shouted, Oi! Brigadier! Any, brigadiers out there? I yelled. Ruff rolled his eyes and whispered, Clever. A voice boomed from a shivering bush to our right. Good Lord, Rat! Keep your bleeding voice down. Can't have the big hats down on this what? A corgi bounded out. He was blond with a white tummy and white feet. He wore a gold medal on a red sash. His ears were huge. They swiveled and pivoted at every noise. His backside was tailless and wiggled non-stop as if to make up for the lack of tail. He shouted in a much louder voice than I used. You must be Bern! I nodded. He pushed his muzzle right up against me, took a big sniff. My whiskers flew forward and I put my front paws on his nose for fear of being sucked in. He pulled back and stared at the sky in thought. He shrugged and said, I thought you'd be taller. I looked at him. Sorry? I said. I wasn't sure why I apologized, but it sounded like he expected it. The brigadier gave a sharp nod of acknowledgement and went on to say, Oh, that's quite all right. What? No need to apologize. A little on the short side myself. What? Brigadier punctuated every sentence with a bark of, What? When he barked, his entire body would vibrate a few inches above the ground. He walked us over to the gazebo. Buckingham Palace was behind us. The security lights lit the walls so that they were an unearthly white. He said, Desdemona said you wanted to have your little soiree here beside the gazebo. Ruffs asked, Desdemona? Brigadier snorted. Fleur's mother! Lovely bird, what? She was so proud when Fleur joined the royal service at the tower. I corrected. Circus. What? He barked. I told him, circus, not soiree. We're not doing a party. We want to hold a performance during lunchtime Friday. He looked at me. Just rats? No, sir, I answered. A few squirrels, some hummingbirds, a few mice, and some other birds. Brigadier nodded. Any cats? Can't abide the filthy beast. What? Ruff and I looked at each other. What planet was this dog from? Cats? In what reality could a band of rats and other assorted prey invite a cat to be in anything with them? Ruff hid a smile behind his paw, answered the corgi. No, sir. No cats in the show that I know of. Leamington's muzzle broke into a wide, toothy grin. Capital! He was a chatty little fellow. He walked us around the site and finalized the details of our performance. We stopped near the gates of the palace. He eyed us both solemnly before asking one last question. There is no fire in your little performance, is there? We shook our heads no. He harumphed. Good thing, what? Can't have the whole place up in flames. Guards will make a fuss. Well, nice meeting you. What? Enjoy your little show, and if there's a problem, find me. With that, he wiggled under the gates and left at a jaunty trot to disappear around the corner of the palace. Ruff shook his head and said, Amazing. I looked at him and said, What? What? In my best brigadier voice. He smiled. Just the people we've met on this journey. Strange assortment. I laughed. I'm sure we just met the first layer. It probably gets weirder. Ruff grinned back. I like weird. Keeps me on my toes, he told me. I shook my head. I'll take a boring any day. I'll take boring any day. Ruff clapped me on my back. He said, you never struck me as boring, Bern. A bit of a wet hen, but never boring. I replied, thanks? All right, kids. End of chapter 10. The next one, it gets even weirder and scarier, and you just won't believe it. I thought this other bit was going to be in this chapter, but I guess it's on the next chapter. But Nellie did get hurt. I feel bad for her. And anyway, yeah. Chapter 11 is going to be Bottom of the River. Dun, 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 dun. And I hope you have a good week. Get some sleep. Do your homework. Eat lots of fresh fruit. Drink water. Do all the stuff you're supposed to do. Have fun. Make friends. And remember to be nice. And try to make things fair when you can. You know what I mean? Anyway. Mwah, mwah, mwah. You kids take care. Thank you for watching. Bye.